Your team might be having a very, very, very bad season. Your team could be having the worst season possible. Your team could have not gotten a single point this entire season. Far as I'm concerned, I haven't heard about any teams that have accomplished that feat so far. But even if you had accomplished that feat so far, your team would still be doing better than Vitesse. That's right. I hope that I'm saying it right. I hope it's not Vitesse or something. Me versus the Dutch language is one of the greatest battles of our time. But I was tagged in this a lot on Twitter, and so I wanted to kind of dig into it because it's very weird. Because you see points deductions for a lot of things, and that's what's happened to Vitesse. Right, they're bottom of the Eredivisie with 4 matches to go. They are not appealing this suspension, so it is going to stick, and they have -1 points. That is... striking, right? That also means they are just a measly 82 points away from catching PSV at the top of the table. Still 0-0, lads. Time to push on. Definitely a tough spot to be in. Now, they were threatened to be relegated anyways. They were trying to get themselves up into the position that Volendam is in. They were, I believe, if I remember, they were, within 3 points of Volendam. It's not like Vitesse was in mid-table or in a European places and got yeeted all the way down here. The penalty was 18 points. So they were on 17 points already. They've been having a terrible season, which is really sucks because in 2022, this is a team that was in the Conference League round of 16. This has been a pretty significant quick fall off and will result in the club being relegated for the first time in over 30 years. And so this is a regular mainstay club in the Eredivisie. So what could possibly have gone wrong to the extent that Vitesse is now sitting on -1 points with 4 matches to play? And I mentioned earlier that this was a weird suspension that I'd never seen before. This has nothing to do explicitly with violations of financial rules. Every other single point deduction that we seem to come across in the modern age has to do with some sort of violation of financial rules, whether that be you spent too much money or you didn't make enough money or you pretended you made more money than you actually did. I'm looking at you, Manchester City. At least Jude Bellingham didn't step on your badge, right? But Vitesse is caught up in a whole other mess for a whole different reason. And it's actually kind of tied into, weirdly, a video that I already made on the main Zealand channel. I just never thought to come back and look at it again, or never thought to come back and look at it and try and understand what the Dutch authorities might think about it. Now, the title is this one. It's Roman Abramovich secretly bought another club. And the video explores various allegations that Roman Abramovich was involved in the funding of the initial purchase of Vitesse, right? Because Vitesse is not owned, obviously, on paper by Roman Abramovich. That would not be allowed. But this video, I actually ended up diving into like a shell corporation website that operates out of Cyprus. It was weird. It's one of the weirdest videos I've ever researched to actually do. And the point is that under a bunch of layers, there were some pretty serious allegations that Roman Abramovich was basically the guy that was bankrolling Vitesse. He wasn't the guy that was at the matches doing all of the public-facing stuff, but he was the guy behind the scenes that was bankrolling everything. And the result of that, as this translated document from the Dutch Federation kind of finds out, is that they were not able to financially verify everything that they were doing in a way that would allow them to achieve a Dutch license to operate. They got the huge point deduction because they were falling afoul of licensing rules. It has repeatedly failed to meet the requirements of the licensing regulations over a longer period of time. The amount of the sanction is based on the exceptional seriousness and extent of violations of the licensing system. This includes providing incorrect information that was important for forensic investigation into a possible violation of sanctions legislation. So what is basically happening here is if in order to get your license to operate as a football club in this instance, and basically every country has a pretty similar system. You need to be able to present your books. You need to be able to verify various financial things, and they are accusing Vitesse and its owners in name, of violating their trust, basically, of providing incorrect information. Right, trying to mislead investigators, because if they essentially had provided the information, that would be a possible violation of sanctions legislation. There are obviously sanctions against Russian businessmen. That's why Abramovich was forced to sell Chelsea, and that's why Abramovich, being significantly financially involved with Vitesse, would be a really, really serious issue. Even though he's buried under a bunch of layers, eventually you have to be able to prove to the licensing board where this money is freaking coming from. And they tried to come up with a trail that basically the Dutch authorities were able to sniff out. Now, it doesn't sound like this is over. They're going to assess other possible violations. In this context, additional information is being requested from Vitesse. Obviously, it's going to be difficult for Vitesse, as it seems like they are at least kind of shadow run by Roman Abramovich. It's going to be very difficult for them to answer those questions in a way that avoids other possible violations. The licensing committee will come out again if additional sanctions are imposed. So this might be just the beginning of a process that could kind of murder a club that's existed at the top level of the Dutch game for a really long time. And again, just 2 years ago, was in the round of 16 of the Conference League. They were playing the eventual winners of that. That's who they lost to. They lost to Roma, who won the whole thing in the round of 16 back in 2022. So the licensing committee also says they received a restructuring plan submitted by the club, and they sent that back. They're awaiting an amended plan. There's no mention, obviously, of Abramovich in this, just the fact that, they could be in a possible violation of sanctions legislation. The sanctions would be against Roman Abramovich. And in this ESPN article, they pointed out in the first line, they're talking about Roman Abramovich, the former owner of Chelsea. And it's basically his ties to Vitesse that have ended up causing this massive points deduction. But what the ESPN article also points out is that an investigation by The Guardian last year alleged Abramovich secretly funded Vitesse with more than $100 million. That's an investigation that was involved in the video that I made at the time. Like, if you really want, this channel is just for me kind of spitballing about how crazy this stuff is. But if you really want, like, the whole background of this situation with the points deduction being at the end, I totally recommend checking out this video. In a rare turn of events for this channel, what I'm talking about, we've actually researched in excruciating detail that involved me legitimately emailing a Cypriot. I emailed them. They never responded to me. I was attempting to create a shell corporation. Kind of insulted. I guess they just didn't think I was cool enough, but whatever. The point is that video and all the research we did really made it feel like Roman Abramovich was the guy that helped fund the purchase of the club, and that at times would just cut a big check to help fund the club as well, because the people that were on the front line, the people that were the faces of it, it's kind of a bit mysterious how they would have come upon the money that they actually had in order to, to kind of run the club the way that they were running it. But the real crime here, the real disappointing thing is the fans of Vitesse, right? I mean, I can't imagine your club's in the Eredivisie for over 30 years, and now you're staring at one of many potential sanctions based off of the ownership of your club. This is a story I feel like we talk about a lot in England because there are so many professional clubs in England, but it can happen other places too. And, this is another instance where the kind of regulations and politics are running into club football because they've not run afoul of any other rule other than the fact that Roman Abramovich has sanctions against him. He can't be a part of the ownership of the club, and Vitesse has not been able to prove that he's not, essentially, so they've just failed the licensing exam. It's a weird situation, absolutely sucks for the fans. And honestly, Roman Abramovich just seems to be addicted to running football clubs. The dude is so into it that he's trying to sneakily continue to run a football club. But it looks like even sneaking around behind closed doors, behind shell corporations, is still not going to be good enough. He's been caught by the Dutch authorities, and hopefully that restructuring plan ends up finding Vitesse on some solid ground where somebody can come in and buy the club and actually return it to a healthy state. That is definitely optimistic thinking, but hopefully something like that is around the corner for them, because this is not a club that, has lived beyond its means for too long. This is a club that financially, it doesn't need the $100 million. It's injecting the $100 million from Abramovich to just try and compete at a higher level, but it was doing just fine before it was purchased by this front for Roman Abramovich. But, can't roll back the clock on it now. The point deduction's in. They're not appealing it, and Vitesse is going down.